We asked a series of questions. One of the questions was, what are the main barriers? And the main barrier across both gender is not having someone to go with. Some of the other ones were, of course, safety. So human confrontation, wildlife confrontation, as well as an issue. We also asked if people think that the landscape or the nature photography community is welcoming to women. And most of the women said no or somewhat. We even had some guys that said no.
Well, hey everyone. Welcome to episode 391 of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen with your host, Matt Payne. This week on the podcast, I had a very stimulating conversation with Canadian-born landscape photographer, Fiona McLean. Fiona has dual citizenship in the United Kingdom and splits her time between Vancouver, British Columbia, and Edinburgh, Scotland. She's a hiking guide and loves photographing waterfalls and mountains. She also has a huge passion for promoting women landscape photographers, and she's embarked on a journey to try to discern why there are so few women landscape photographers, or so it seems, which is the focus of much of our conversation this week, so buckle up. Okay, let's get to this week's conversation with Fiona McLean. All right, Fiona McLean, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It's really nice to meet you in person finally, or virtually at least.
Yeah,
after such a long time.
I was going to say, I feel like we've been emailing each other back and forth forever.
Yeah, I think it was since Clubhouse days, actually, which just seems like a long time ago. Yeah.
God, 4 years ago?
3 years ago now, I think. 3.5 years ago almost, yeah.
Well, Fiona, for people who aren't familiar with you and your photography, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So I'm a dual Canadian-British citizen. My parents were Scottish. They immigrated to Canada. I was born in Montreal, grew up in Montreal and Toronto, and then later moved to Vancouver. So I'm a West Coaster. I left in 2000 looking for a European version of Vancouver with better weather and a different language, and left for Europe. So I've been over here, apart from some time I spent back in Canada between 2016 and 2019. I've been in Europe for whatever that is now, 24 years almost, minus 3.5, so 20 years. I've lived in a few different countries, in a few different cities, and I've been doing photography this time around seriously since 2016, but I originally started back in 2000, which I'm sure we'll get into in a wee bit. I'm a hiking guide as well. I've got my own business. So I'm based part of the year in Scotland, and I'm based in Edinburgh, and I go back to Vancouver, usually in the winters, so it's not necessarily the best time of the year to be going over there, but so I'm a hiking guide, so I've got a guiding business based here in Scotland, which is mainly sort of spring, summer into just maybe the beginning of fall, and then I go back to Canada. This past winter I did my Canadian guiding qualification as well, so I'll be starting to do that this year when I go back, starting in the fall, actually starting next month.
Well, I would be lying if I didn't say I was a little bit jealous, because Vancouver is definitely one of the areas that I would love to spend some more time in, and I would love also to spend some time in Scotland. So I feel like you've kind of got the best of both worlds going on there.
Yeah, so Edinburgh is kind of like a European version of Vancouver, but with similar or worse weather and the same language but a different accent. So the one thing I miss here is the summers. I kind of miss being able to wear shorts and a t-shirt and sandals and go swimming and all that kind of thing. But yeah, Edinburgh is such a beautiful city, and the history and the architecture and the culture it's really compact and walkable, which I really love. And Vancouver has everything. It's mountains, ocean, rainforest, skiing in the winter, pretty much every sport in the summer, and really both have really great quality of life.
Yeah. So I understand that you moved from Vancouver in 2000 and you moved to Europe.
Yeah.
What was the reason for your move? I mean, I know you said you were looking for a European version of Vancouver, but I'm sure there was a lot more to it. So
yes, it was following a life reevaluation which was about a 2-year life reevaluation. After my relationship ended, I called off my wedding 4 months before, so don't worry, I didn't leave him at the altar or anything. And so I was working at the time. He co-owned a bike store with another guy, and they weren't making very much money, and I was working at a job that I hated. because I was making really good money and I was supporting us. And so anyhow, so after we split up, I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? I'm not traveling. I'm not using my languages. So I did my undergrad, I did a business degree with kind of a minor, you could call it, in languages. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do? And it took me a couple of years to kind of decide what I was going to do. So yeah, when I did European languages during my undergrad. And I grew up in Montreal. So I went to French school. I did French immersion all the way to the end of high school. And picked up some other languages at university. And the plan had always kind of been to live in Europe. And so it just was the right time, and I decided to go. And I had a British passport. So at the time, back in those days, we were able to live and work freely in any EU country, European Union. And so yeah, I took advantage of that while I could. So I'm really glad, because now, of course, we've had Brexit in the past few years. So those of us with British citizenship can no longer live and work freely in Europe. So those opportunities aren't there anymore. So I'm glad I had them. Yes, that was kind of the reason for leaving. And when I was back in Vancouver not this past winter, year before, one of my really good friends was saying, oh, how long is it you've been gone now? I said, oh, it's been about 22 and a half years. So now it's been a bit more than 23 and a half. And she was saying, oh yeah, how's your search going? It's like, yeah, I haven't found that European version of Vancouver yet. And so I don't know if there is one. In fact, I don't know if there's anywhere in the world version of Vancouver. It's really a special place. But I love Europe. I love the lifestyle, and I love the languages. I love that you can jump on a plane or a train, and in a few hours you're in a different country with different architecture, different mentality, different cuisine, different language, different way of dressing, different attitudes. I love it. I think it's really, really cool. And because from the US or Canadian side, you can travel from one side of the country to the other, and it's pretty much the same. People might have slight differences in their accent, but everything's pretty much the same. So yeah, I love the diversity here.
So went back in 2000 when you made the move. What were you doing then? What did you discover in terms of evocation in Europe? And then what are you doing now?
Yeah. Oh, there have been so many different things. This kind of goes into how I got into photography. So back at the beginning of 2000, when I was trying to figure out what I was doing and where I was going to go and what am I going to be when I grow up, and a group of friends and I, so there were 5 of us, 5 women, and we decided we were going to do, as a New Year's resolution, we were going to do the Artist's Way. And so for those who don't know what the Artist's Way is, it's kind of like a course that you do. It's a book. It's got 12 chapters. And so the woman who wrote it was a recovered alcoholic. So she did it kind of like a 12-step program. And so each chapter is basically representative of a week. And it's about recovering and discovering your creativity. And so to me, I was like, well, I don't have any creativity. I'm not creative. I was the smart one. So growing up, I'm the older one. I've got a younger brother. And so I was the academic, studious one and did really well. And my brother was the artistic, creative one. So to me, it's just like, okay, well, if you have to be painting and drawing or maybe doing sculpture to be artistic and creative, and I'm, good at math and languages and science, so I'm obviously not creative. So I was like, okay, this will be interesting. So I'll discover my creativity. And so I was the only one of the 5 of us who wasn't married and had no kids. And I was also the only one who worked full time, and I was also the only one who did the whole course fully and all the questions. So each week there's a theme and there are questions to do, and you're supposed to do journaling every day and do what she calls an artist date. So you go out every week by yourself and you do something. So it could be going to a concert or going for a walk on the beach or going to a museum, or for me, one of the things was going to a bookstore. I can spend hours in a bookstore. Towards the end of the 12 weeks, my mom and dad used to spend the winters down in Arizona because my dad had quite bad arthritis. And so they get in their big camper trailer thing and they go down to Arizona. And so I went down to meet them. And so off I go. I've got my mountain bike with me and my hiking stuff, and I'm all set for this great adventurous trip and spending some time with them. And we were in Sedona kind of towards the end of the trip. So I went off on my own for the afternoon. I was having my artist date and went into this little sort of galleria kind of place. And so I remember it had 2 levels, and it kind of a bit, I don't know, sort of U-shaped or square U-shaped. And it was up on the left-hand side on the upper level. And there was this little gallery. And I went in, and there's this couple who were, I don't know, probably in their mid-50s or something at the time. And they'd given up their jobs. I can't remember where they were from, somewhere in the States. And they had decided to go on this big road trip. I think they might have been on motorcycles. And they basically just went around the Southwest, and they just were taking landscape photographs. And I went in, and it was just all these beautiful, amazing images. And it just was like, oh, yeah, this is what I want to do. And so I got back to Vancouver and I said, great, I'm going to take some photography courses, what's out there. And there was a photography school at the time in Vancouver that had an intro to photography starting, I think literally it's like a week later, and there were still spots. So I signed up for that. And then I did an intro to darkroom. And then later that summer, I did another retreat workshop thing that was over sort of on an island off Vancouver Island. I was kind of thinking, oh, well, what kind of photography should I do? And I really like landscape, but maybe travel photography. Maybe I should be a travel writer, travel photographer, and that can get me out and doing stuff in Europe. But I went on a weekend workshop. It was a young woman that was running it, and she was a photojournalist, and she was working with an Indigenous community, and it was all about the logging that they were doing, and some of it against the wishes of the Indigenous people of the area, and basically how they were just clear cutting all this beautiful old growth forest. And so it was called Bear to Witness or Call to Witness or something. So a bunch of us went, and it was about photographing the area and seeing what was happening and being able to convey that message to other people. And so that really got me, because I was already really interested in the environment. And so that kind of spurred me to thinking, actually, you know what, I want to go abroad and I want to do postgrad studies in documentary photography, focusing on environmental issues. And so off I came. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll do my English teacher training, because I thought I'd go to, I don't know, France or Italy or somewhere in Europe, Spain or something, and do my postgrad studies there. But I needed to be able to support myself while I was there. So English teaching would be a good thing. So I did that. And then I worked at various jobs. And then so it was in 2003, 2004, I was doing a part-time evening course in photojournalism and documentary photography at the London College of Printing. So I was living in London at the time in England. Really enjoyed it. And I applied to do my master's with them. And heading down that road, and I was invited to come for, shortlisted and invited to come for an interview with my portfolio. And I'd just come out of this really horrible, like the worst experience of my life, a supremely toxic work environment. There was workplace bullying. I was one of 3 people on our team that was bullied. I came out feeling like really kind of pretty worthless, and my self-confidence was really shattered. And so as I was heading down this path, I kind of basically chickened out, is what happened. So I kind of had 3 questions. I thought, okay, can I actually make any money in this kind of career? Am I good enough even? And well, also, how do I even do a portfolio? Then it was also, it was kind of like, if I want to bring about some kind of environmental awareness or change, is taking pictures really the best way to do it? Like maybe I should do something more practical. So instead I actually did go a more academic, practical route, and I did master's and started a PhD in environmental social sciences at University College London. And yeah, I didn't finish the PhD. I actually went to get a job in Brussels and for working for an environmental NGO. My thesis was transport related. So I ended up working in sustainable transport, and I went down that path, and I was working in that for over 10 years, about 12 years probably, and doing various things. So NGO, I worked sort of freelance consultant. I worked for nonprofit association. I worked for public sector. A lot of it was UK based, actually. I did a lot on cycling, so cycling for transport, because I also was a cyclist. So I did a lot of cycling oriented projects. And so I was working for this company, and I ended up getting burnt out. And so I was off work for several months. And so I went back to Canada. So my dad had died the year before of cancer, and so I was going back and forth quite often before that. And then after he died, I went back a few times to help my mom. And so I went back, and she was downsizing. So she had sold the house, and she was about to move to a new house. And I thought, well, can't let her do that by herself. She's like 75 or something like that. So I went back to help her, and decided to leave my job and decided to stay in Canada for the summer. So I went back just before she moved. And so my parents had the same birthday, and they got married the day before their birthday. So that was, for her, that was harder than the 1-year anniversary of his death a month later. And so I went back for that to be with her, because it was difficult for all of us. And she picked me up at the airport. And so my parents had left Vancouver, and they'd moved to the interior of BC 2.5 years after I left. And we're driving along, and she said, "Oh, I've got some bad news. Do you want to hear it?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, no, not really." And so anyhow, I said, "Oh, yeah, okay, fine, sure, tell me." And so I've got 3 older half-brothers from my dad's first marriage, and they grew up in Scotland. And where my younger brother and I grew up in Canada. And so anyhow, so the oldest half brother had written to her and said that the son of one of my other brothers had been killed the day before in a skiing accident. And so he was a coach. He was a free
wow.
skier. Yeah. And so, yeah, so he was a really one of the most positive people I've ever met. He was always enthusiastic. He was always happy. He was always smiling. He lived life really to 150%. And what really was sad is I didn't really ever know him very well because he had grown up and left home for the most part by the time I moved over. And I didn't see my brothers that much before I moved over to Europe. But it was that really kind of made me reflect back on, that I had been pursuing photography and I'd put it behind me and I was off on burnout. And I thought, well, I don't really want to stay in this career anymore. But what am I going to do? And I thought, he was living his life 150% and he was doing what he really loved. And what do I really love? And I thought, what about my photography? I don't want to turn 75 one day and then think, wow, like I never even tried. And so, so I picked up my photography again and started going out and doing landscape stuff and local stuff. So I was doing a lot of hiking and then when I was there over the winter, cross-country skiing and snowshoeing. So I was just shooting what I was seeing and what I was doing. And it was a lot of grand landscapes that I was doing at the time. And then it kind of eventually evolved. But that summer, my plan was originally to go and travel and have like an eat, pray, love / wild kind of trip and figure out my life and, okay, what's going to be next? And again, coming back to, maybe travel writing, maybe travel photography. I was like, how can I get paid to travel and be in the outdoors and take pictures? And so anyhow, so I was going to go traveling in Asia for a year or two, and I was going to start off in Nepal, and I was having a big, decade-changing birthday that year. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to start off in Nepal. I'm going to go trekking in Nepal. I'm going to then go, kind of work my way down like south and east through Asia, and eventually maybe go to Australia, New Zealand. I was going to go do yoga in an ashram and meditate in a Buddhist monastery and, kind of figure myself out. But then that summer while I was back in Canada, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I stayed to be her caregiver because, I'd left my apartment in London. I'd left my job. I had no ties. I had no commitments. My stuff was in storage already. So yeah, of course I'm going to stay, which was really like one of the best things I've ever done in my life and probably will be. My mom and I were really close. So she lasted a little over a year and a half. It was really special to have that time with her. And it was during that period that I actually got onto Instagram. And so I was going out and doing some shooting. And I was in this small town in central British Columbia where I didn't know anybody. My parents had been living there for years, but every time I went, it was just to spend time with them. And I hadn't ever really gotten to know anybody. So I didn't have any friends there. So it was really difficult being there. And I felt really isolated. And so, back in the days when Instagram was a bit easier, so this was in 2016. And, when you could still get engagement and connect with people, just kind of seeing people, especially in Canada, like in the region of Canada, Western Canada, BC, and the Rockies in particular, and just seeing where people were going and what they were doing, and hiking and snowshoeing and these outdoor adventure kind of things, and just sort of the beauty of nature. And that really helped me sort of dealing with the deaths of my dad and my nephew, and now my mom was sick, and I was going through burnout, and I was trying to figure out my life. And so it just kind of gave me like a really positive thing to focus on, to just see the beauty of the world and nature and to connect with people, some of whom were kind of local, or and see what they were doing and get ideas of places to travel, or just kind of think of something positive for the future. So that winter, it was January 2017, my mom had started her chemo. And I came back because I had stuff in storage, and I didn't have any winter clothes with me. So one of the places I used to live in was Barcelona, and I had a lot of my stuff was in storage there. So I had stuff in storage in Barcelona, I had stuff in storage in London. So I'd gone down to Barcelona to get rid of some stuff and also to pick up a few things. While I was there, I went off to Andorra, to the Pyrenees, to go have a few days of my own and to go hiking. And while I was there, I found this little kind of baby waterfall, and I'd been seeing people's images of water and waterfalls and long exposure, and I was really interested in that, and I'd never done it before. And so seeing this little thing, okay, I'm gonna try to do this. So I did, and that kind of, once I got back, that kind of kick-started what has become a love, and well, actually I'd say now it's kind of actually become an addiction for waterfalls. And so yeah, exposure waterfalls, and yeah, it's kind of gone from there. And yeah, so that's a very long answer to the question.
Yeah. So as you were talking, I was thinking about all of the trauma and grief that you experienced in such a short period of time, and I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to the role that photography played in terms of not only processing that trauma and that grief, but also I'd be curious if you could talk a little bit about how that potentially manifested in your images, if it did at all, or if you've had hindsight to see how your images have kind of changed over time with periods of grief versus periods of happiness.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, with grief, I think that grief never goes away. Once you've lost somebody, it's always there. It's not going to be as deep or as profound, but it's always there. So it's been 6.5 years now since my mom died, and 9.5 since my dad died, and 8.5 since my nephew died. And it's still there. Like, I can hear a song and it'll make me cry, or sometimes, I'm okay at the moment, but it could be that I could be telling you, and I could just get a catch in my throat and suddenly start choking up and be crying.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never gone. It's just you get on with living life. I think that's the problem with the burnout, is that I was living in London, very much the opposite of Vancouver. No mountains, no ocean, not much green space. And I realized looking back that going hiking or being out in the forest or going to the beach and sitting by the sea when I lived in Vancouver, like that was very much my stress relief and my way of grounding myself and just kind of connecting and getting perspective. And I wasn't doing that. So I was working crazy hours, like 60 to 80 hour weeks. I was traveling all the time. I was cycling for transport, but I wasn't going to the gym. I wasn't hiking. I wasn't doing yoga. I wasn't seeing friends even. So when I came back to Canada, that was one of the first things I was doing. I was out hiking regularly. I was snowshoeing and cross-country skiing in the winter, and I was always taking my camera with me. So that was giving me that connection with nature, but also kind of seeing like things that are bigger than us, and seeing that, we're all going to live, and a certain amount of time we're all going to die, but nature goes on in whatever way, shape, or form. So it kind of gave me perspective on that. It gave me something positive to focus on. It gave me a creative outlet. So obviously, since I did the artist's way, I discovered I do actually have some creativity. And so, it gave me something fun that was for me, that wasn't about doing something for somebody else. It was just for me. So I would consider myself a mountain girl. And that's, if someone says like, what kind of landscape do you want to be in? Mountains. Like I don't feel comfortable with flat spaces or, any place where you just see ongoing land and finally a horizon. Like I just don't feel comfortable with that. It just puts me at unease. But that summer I completely lost my mountain mojo. I had no real attraction to mountains. I went out for the summer and spent 2 months in Vancouver Island, and then I went up to the Yukon and then back to Ontario and Quebec where I grew up. So I was traveling pretty much across Canada for 5 months. But when I was on Vancouver Island, I was really just pulled to the sea and to waterfalls. So I did a lot of waterfall chasing that spring, and I was talking about it recently with someone who also lost their mom not too long ago, and just about the healing properties of water. And so for her, it's the sea, and for me, I was like, oh, actually, that really makes sense. So it was the sea and the waterfalls. So, and I didn't even really feel like doing that much hiking. So a lot of the hiking I did was coastal hiking. And so back in the days when I lived in Vancouver the first time, and I did a lot of sports. So I competed in triathlons and mountain biking and road racing, and it was always kind of set your watch and okay, ready, okay, go, let's go. And, trying to race up the hills as fast as you can, and let's get there, let's get a good workout, off we go. So, something like doing a gentle hike through a woodlands or to a waterfall, that's not really interesting. So that's slowing down from burnout and from the grief. Like that's made me, I think slowing down in general and seeing smaller things as well.
That totally makes sense. I wanted to spend a big chunk of time talking about another subject that I know that you're incredibly passionate about, and that's promoting women in landscape photography. Yep. And I know that you've developed a survey that's designed to kind of assess women's participation in landscape and nature photography. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about kind of the origins of the survey, what the contents of the survey are, and maybe follow that up with what you've gleaned from it so far, because I know you're not done, but...
So I'm passionate about promoting women, not just in photography, but in a lot of different areas. So I've worked for a lot of, certainly the past 25 or so years, maybe even a little bit before that. I don't know, I keep ending up being involved in or working in male-dominated industries. So, it's outdoor sport industry. I worked in sport management back in Vancouver. I did race management as well. I've worked in transport, photography. So yeah, they're all male dominated, and I've competed as well in really male dominated sports. And so all of that has kind of brought my attention to, and I think also maybe because my mom was a nurse, and then she was, she worked her way up, and she was a manager and then a nursing director when she retired, and for the women's hospital in BC, and worked in midwifery and labor and delivery. And she was but predominantly surrounded by women. So she worked in a very female oriented environment. And so I think that made me more aware of suddenly being in an environment where it's like, where are the women? And so when I lived in Vancouver, I organized for a couple of years in 96 and 97 a women's triathlon and training clinic. And it was, because I was competing and I could see, like, where are the women? Like, why do we have so few women? This is a great sport. We should have more women. And so it was specifically the training clinic was meant to break down the barriers and see, like, what are the barriers to women participating in this sport? How can we deal with those? So it was women coaches, it was by women for women. So it was women coaches and helping to create a supportive, encouraging environment. So I've gone through other fields and done the same thing. So it's done with Viktoria Haack. So she's one of my best friends. And we actually met while I was back in BC when I was looking after my mom, because she lives in a town that's just a wee bit north of where my mom and dad were living. And so we talk a lot about various things to do with photography in the field, and the good things and the bad things. She's a full-time professional, so she's been in it for a number of years. So she's seen directly, either to herself or to other women, some disadvantages, some experiences where she's maybe been the only woman, or she's maybe been looked over or not recognized. And we've got a lot of guy friends as well who are photographers. And so we were saying, okay, there's a common perception that there are fewer women landscape photographers. And when we point out that women are underrepresented, some people say, oh, well, maybe it's just because women aren't that interested. And we don't think that's the case. And we actually wondered if it is actually the case that there are way less women, or is it just that they're not as visible? And so going back to my experience with the women's triathlon, and I also participated in a women's mountain bike training camp back in the day, which actually turned me into a mountain biker, just by the virtue of seeing what are the barriers and then helping you get over them and teaching you what to do and how to do it. I thought, well, what are the barriers in landscape photography for women? Because is it something technical? Is it they don't really understand how they use their gear properly, or they're intimidated by it? Is it to do with editing? Is it to do with, that they don't know where to go to? Is it safety concerns? So we thought, we can conjecture. We've talked to some of our women friends, so we know what some of their issues are, but let's do a survey. And actually, let's include the guys, because we want to be able to do a bit of a comparison, and we want to understand the differences, and we want to ask the women themselves, what are the reasons that you're not participating as much as you could, as you might otherwise? And, so we thought that we can't address barriers properly if we don't really know what they are. So we put out the survey. We've had just under 400 responses so far, so it's still open, and we're going to leave it open, and hopefully, we'd love to get to 1,000, which would be really great. So we asked all different things. So we wanted to know, we asked for things like gender and where people are from. So Victoria and I set up a community called Women Photographers Canada. There's been quite a few women's groups that have been set up in the past few weeks, even a few months, but even in the past few years. In various countries. So there's quite a few in the US, there's one in Australia, there's a few in the UK, but we didn't see anything in Canada. And so it was actually Vic that set it up first. And I thought about it before, but it's one of those things, it's a lot of work to do on your own, and you really want to have a group. And I listened to your recent episode with the women from Outdoor Photo Alliance. And so it's the three of them working on it together. And it really helps having someone else. If it's just you kind of championing something on your own, it's a lot. And anyhow, so we thought, okay, well, what can we do, at least with Canadian women, and to help address these barriers? But we also want to know what are the barriers for other people. So we've got, a lot of US people have replied as well. We've got some Brits, we've got people from, a lot of different, a few from Australia. We looked at what level are they at? Are they beginner? Are they advanced? How many years have they been doing it? And so we asked a series of questions. And then, of course, one of the questions was, what are the main barriers? And we just put out on the account, on our Instagram account, about a week or two ago, that the main barrier across both three genders, because there were some non-binary people also that replied, is not having someone to go with. And so we haven't had a chance yet to analyze and see if that's the number one barrier for women, but that was the number one barrier overall. So some of the other ones were, of course, safety, so human confrontation. There's some, obviously, wildlife confrontation as well as an issue. We also asked if people think that the landscape or the nature photography community is welcoming to women. And so we had a lot of answers on that. And so we had most of the women said no or somewhat. We even had some guys that said no. We had some women who thought, yeah, I think it's fine, it's okay. We asked them also how they learned, where they share their work, all that kind of stuff. So it seems that things like childcare or parent care, those often fall more so to women. So that's something that seems, from what we've seen so far, that seems to be more of an issue for women. The human confrontation is also one for guys, and I don't have the stats. Not as many guys, but I think the thing with the guys is that they're more thinking, and this was also the case, especially we found with some of the people who do astro, that if you're out by yourself sometime at night when it's dark, you're vulnerable, and anybody could come along. And so for guys, it was more an issue of is someone going to come along and beat me up or mug me and try to steal my stuff? Whereas with women, it was more physical safety. Is some psycho killer going to come along? Is there somebody going to try to sexually assault me? So those are some of the issues. And so we've got a lot of material. So I think we've had 394 responses so far. So we've got a lot of material to go through. But even within that, people don't have someone to go with. Why is that? Is it because you don't have people in your neighborhood or in your area that you know? Is it because maybe you work shifts and the other people have different hours? So we're trying to see that, and then we'll hopefully be trying to find a way, at least within Canada, of trying to connect people, and especially women, to be able to meet up and connect and go out with each other. So it was a bit like with the Women on the Outdoor Photo Alliance, they were talking about having a group where they were able to connect and go out together as a group. And so I think that's, I don't want to say I think that's unusual, but I don't know so many women that have people to go out with. I know a lot of guys that have people to go out with. So I think that's also part of it. And it seemed to be especially the case for people who are beginners, is that when they're learning is they want to have someone to go out with because they maybe don't know where to go, or they want to learn how to use their gear and observe somebody, and just have someone to hang out with and have it be a bit more social.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. It's interesting because on the workshops that we teach through Munch Workshops, I'd say oftentimes half or more of our participants are women, and it's usually a lot of the things you're talking about. Yeah, like they don't have other women friends to go with, or maybe they don't feel comfortable going by themselves. And so, workshops offer kind of a solution to some of those issues. Yeah. And one of the things that I don't totally know how you can assess this through a survey, but I feel like that there's some cultural kind of generalizations between men and women. Like, obviously I'm painting with a big brush here, but typically men are a little bit more competitive. They're told from a young age that you can do whatever you want, and we put ourselves out there more, and we're trying to seek out attention a little bit more with our photography. Whereas it's interesting, like with the Natural Landscape Photography Awards, we hear a lot of women saying things like, "Oh, I don't think I have anything that's good enough," or "I don't think my photography is good enough yet." Whereas like men are just like, "Oh, I'm gonna throw in everything I've got and I don't even care," and like they're just way more confident. I think those are cultural things that also impact kind of your approach to photography, and also how often you get seen, because if you don't have confidence and you're not putting your work out there, then no one's going to know you exist, and therefore you're not going to have the same opportunities as other people who might be more shouty and loud with their approach to marketing themselves. And then I guess the last thing is that overall, I feel like most nature photographers are pretty introverted. And so you've got kind of like a double whammy there of like if there's less women and they're all introverted, like going out and finding other women who are introverted to go photograph with, like those are a lot of barriers to overcome. So
yeah. And that's the thing too. So I'm not an introvert, I'm an extrovert, but I'm an introverted extrovert. So I need to have time to myself once in a while. And it's funny because the same thing for me, when I was first getting into photography, and especially when I was back in Canada, I would have loved to have had someone to go out and shoot with, and I didn't have anybody. So I just went by myself. And that's actually been the case with a lot of the stuff I've done in my life. Hiking, traveling, there's no one around to go. Well, I want to go, I'm just going to go. Okay, fine, I'll go by myself. I'm extroverted, but I find nowadays that I actually prefer to go out shooting by myself. Partly because I find if I'm going shooting with somebody, I'm kind of looking also at like, oh, where are they going and what are they doing? And it's kind of taking away from me seeing what I'm interested in or attracted to, or what's catching my eye. And also, especially when I'm at waterfalls, like I could easily be there and say, oh my God, like 2 hours has gone by. How have I been shooting this waterfall for 2 hours? And so I just feel conscious of, oh, maybe someone's getting impatient and they don't want to wait for me and I have to kind of hurry up. So I'm not spending the time that I want to spend there, or they're shooting something and maybe I'm not really interested in what's in this area. So that's kind of the reason why I sometimes prefer to shoot by myself. So it's not for me really an introvert thing. It's just more of I want to shoot what I want to shoot, and I'm not saying I don't want someone else to be in the way, or because I've done a few road trips with friends. We've done like Vic as well, and another friend, Eugene, who's based here in the UK in North Wales. And we've done some trips a few days. He's one of my best friends, and his birthday's a few days before mine. So each year for the past few years, we've done a trip together. He's come up to Scotland, and we've gone off for a few days before or after our birthdays. And then Vic, it was over last year because she was running a workshop, and the three of us went off together. And so it was interesting because when we'd stop and we'd shoot stuff, and I'd find, they were interested in something, and I couldn't, I don't want to shoot that because we're all just going to have exactly the same shots or very similar shots. So I'm going to go find something else. What am I going to find instead? So for introverts, I don't think it's necessarily just introverts that want to shoot on their own. And for some people, especially people who have really busy lives, they might find the time out this is their unwinding time. This is their connecting to nature time. This is how they get away from it all, and they don't want somebody else around. And so maybe the same thing. They don't want someone who's going to say, well, I don't really want to go shoot that. Let's go here instead, or let's do this, or I don't want to wait for you. Can we get going? So I think that can be part of it as well.
Yeah, and I think, again, I'm generalizing, so just take it with a little bit of a grain of salt here. But one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of my favorite women nature photographers, their work has kind of more of a quieter style to it. It's more nuanced. The colors are more subdued. Maybe they're more pastel in nature. The compositions might be more complicated or more simplified, and they're typically not like loud and in your face. Whereas like that's kind of like what gets attention on Instagram is those loud, shouty images. And if those aren't the types of images that you're drawn to, and those aren't the type of images that you're photographing and sharing with the world, then once again, the pop culture aspect of the field we're in is kind of going against you in that way too. So I think there's multiple things going on here, is I guess all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Do you think, so I'm not sure if this is actually the case, or because I've kind of noticed and I've wondered if it's just because this is what I'm interested and attracted to, but this whole thing of people starting to do more intimate scenes and more abstracts or softer kind of things, men as well. Do you think that's maybe post-pandemic, or it seems to me that seems to be kind of a way that people are moving in the past few years? Like, it doesn't seem to me that there's quite as much of the grand landscapes. I mean, there is still, but people are doing that, not solely focused just on that as much anymore. That there seems to be, there's ICM coming now, there's abstracts, there's these softer, smaller, intimate scenes. Like in all the people's work that you're seeing, do you kind of see that trend as well, or am I just imagining something here?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question because I've definitely noticed that, but I think there's lots of different variables here. So like within my friend circle, most of people I photograph with and associate with, they've been doing it for a long time. And I think the longer you are in landscape photography, you've kind of, for lack of a better way, like most people kind of grow out of the, like, I'm going to shoot all these iconic grand scenes and that's all I'm going to do. I think people get kind of bored of that.
Yeah.
And so people are looking for ways to stay engaged in nature photography and also doing it in a way that kind of is more personal and speaks to their own style. And I think kind of those tighter scenes, those more intimate scenes and more abstract images are a really great way to do that. And I'm wondering, like, if you were to talk to a generation or a cohort of people who are maybe newer in photography, maybe they're younger, maybe they're more kind of into social media and Instagram. I mean, I feel like once you tap into those audiences, they're still doing that whole, like, let's go to these spots and shoot these grand scenes and let's edit them really wildly. And, I think there's our cohort of people who kind of came up in the early 2000s were kind of transitioning away from that, whereas people who are starting now or maybe 5 years ago, they're still like really excited about that. I bet 10 years from now they'll be where we're at. So I think it's like an evolution process, less than like a trend or a fad. Because I mean, you think of like William Neal and you think of like Elliot Porter. I mean, intimate landscapes have been around forever. It's just you didn't see it as much because there was less marketing around that kind of style of photography and things like that. So I think it's also, it's like who we associate with is a big part of it.
Yeah. Because I wondered too if it's kind of also partly to do with the whole social media thing, that people are kind of sick of seeing the same images of the same places over and over again, and maybe think, well, I don't really want my images to look like everybody else's. I want to do something that's different, that nobody else is going to have this image that I've done, because no one's going to find this exact same spot or this, something along those lines. Because I know certainly that's the thing, especially this, as I said earlier.
I was going to say, I can only speak for myself, but that's one of the big motivators for me is if I go to a very classic scene that's recognizable, it's fairly difficult to put your own spin on that in a way that is super interesting to me as the photographer. Maybe not the grand audience out there, like all of Instagram or people looking at photos, but for me to stay excited and engaged in photography, I need to challenge myself and give myself more interesting subjects to try out. And so I think, yes, to answer your question, but that's for me. I think other people might have totally different reasons, but that's what I'm hearing from me and a lot of my friends as well.
Yeah, because that's the thing for me. And I think it's also partly when I go out shooting with other people. And I was saying when I was out with Vic and Eugene this past November, and there were a few places where, they went off to shoot sometimes we just all split up and went our own separate way and found what we found. But there was one moment I remember where they went off to shoot these sort of frosty, hoarfrost kind of trees. And we got out of the vans and off we go. And they went off to shoot these trees. And I just kind of got mesmerized by these, they're doing like kind of more macro stuff. Because I was like, I don't want to shoot the same thing as them. And I just found these little plants on the ground and these flowers next to the road that were, all frosty. And I just kind of got mesmerized by those. And so, nobody else has that image. It's just me out of the group that got those. But yeah, I mean, especially from a Canadian perspective, I am so tired of seeing Moraine Lake. It's the same shot over and over and over. And there's nothing new. Like, it's just different clouds, different sky, different, whatever. It's just, it's the same. And yeah.
I totally agree. But imagine if you just started doing photography 3 years ago, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Some of these photographs, this might be the first time you've ever seen a photograph of Moraine Lake, and you're like,
that's true.
Wow, I really want to go photograph that location, and I want to see that for myself. And I think a lot of it has to do with kind of where you are at in your journey. For people like you and me, like, you've been looking at photographs for 20 years, right? It's hard to be surprised.
Yeah. I think that's the thing too, is when you're starting out. I wonder if that's the case for most people who do landscape, if they start out doing the big landscapes and then kind of eventually meander around and find something else, or not something else, maybe they're still doing that, but if they're starting to pick up different things, and just as a progression of your creativity and your craft, I guess.
Yeah, and not to, at the risk of sounding judgy or preachy, I think it's really hard to stake a claim in the ground as an artist and call yourself creative if your approach to making images is to go to familiar locations and compose them in the same way that others have already done.
Yep.
Maybe the light's different, maybe the clouds are different, but if your composition is really similar, like what are you really bringing to the table as a creative person?
Yeah.
You're kind of going through the motions, you're getting the aperture right, you're getting the shutter speed right, you're capturing this really beautiful scene. Nothing wrong with that, by the way, if you love doing that, because I still love to do that on occasion.
Yeah.
And like at some point, at least for me, and I know most people I've talked to, that starts to lose interest in terms of like it no longer is challenging. It's you're not really creating something new. Like the definition of creativity is something that's novel and useful. And in that case, like you definitely aren't doing something novel. So in order to feel creative, I personally have to kind of go to places I've never been before, never seen other images of before, and try to make sense of it and do something with my own take on it. So to me, that's where I get the most satisfaction. But if, you're 5 years in, never been to those locations, never seen pictures of those locations, it might still kind of give you the kicks. So, and that's cool. But at some point, for a lot of people, that kind of doesn't happen anymore. So you got to find other ways to keep yourself excited and engaged.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. And for me, like I've done that as well. I've gone to all those hot spots in the Canadian Rockies and in the Canadian Rockies in particular. And I've been there, and they're spectacular. And there's a reason why people want to go and shoot them, because they really are jaw dropping when you're there. But I've found for me in the past few years, and it's interesting because I think also with my hiking, I've noticed the same thing. So it used to be often I would do my more grand landscapes when I was out hiking. And I think in the past few years, especially because I've mainly been with clients, I haven't done that much hiking for myself really in the past few years, which is not great. And I'm often not bringing the camera gear with me. Sometimes I don't even actually bring my camera. So I'm not shooting the same way. So I've kind of a bit lost the practice of it. But I've also lost the interest in it and become, so as part of my hiking guide qualification, so in the UK it's called Mountain Leader. So as part of the Mountain Leader qualification, you're supposed to have some environmental knowledge. So that's, plants and animals and the birds and the culture and the folklore and the history and the geology and the geography and all that. And so when I was doing my exam, I remember going out and because I was saying earlier, it used to be when I would be going hiking, it'd be set your watch at the start of the trailhead, poof, off you go. And, let's go, let's get to the top. And suddenly I was like, oh crap, I can't do that. I've got to actually like look around and see what's next to the trail and what's here. Oh, look, there's a plant there. What's that plant? Oh, look, there's a bird. And so it made me slow down and start looking around me at other things. So, and then noticing as well, I think, oh, actually, wow, that's really cool. And look at how the water is on that, or it's glistening, or look at the way the light is on it. And so nowadays, actually, I find when I'm out hiking, I'm much more likely to shoot the smaller things. I've gotten really into macro in the past year and a half, 2 years, I guess now. So it's interesting how, for me, that has been my progression. It's doing my hiking guide. It's ironic that doing my hiking guide qualification, where you think I'm out in the grand landscapes, that I've actually moved away from shooting the grand landscapes into shooting the details of what I'm seeing when I'm out hiking. So it's kind of a little bit of an oxymoron, I guess.
No, it's very similar to my history as well. And it's funny because as you were talking, I was reflecting on my experience. I just got home teaching a workshop at Mount Rainier National Park, and had never been there before, but my co-leader had been there like 1,000 times. So I was seeing it with fresh eyes. And of course, we photographed some very classic scenes. And on the very last morning, we photographed like this incredibly classic view of Mount Rainier with a lake below. Like everyone has photographed it because it's right on the side of the road. And it was beautiful light. It was blue hour. The mountain was glowing. There was like fog rising up in between the trees and the mountains, and it was an awesome scene. And I was incredibly excited and passionate and loved photographing that scene. And so it did check some boxes for me. I was like, this is really great. And still, the favorite photograph I took on the whole trip is on a hike through the forest. I found these backlit red cedar leaves, and red cedar leaves are like super flat. It's like this deciduous tree, and the leaves are just like really, really flat, and they kind of dangle down, and they were backlit, and photographed them with my 100 to 400 and with a dark background. And so it was like they were super isolated and beautiful, and like that was my favorite photograph. Had nothing to do with beautiful landscape scene. It was something that I had to notice, like I had to pay attention. I had to then figure it out, make sense of it. And so again, I think it just comes down to like, maybe you haven't experienced the other approach yet, or maybe that kind of approach to photography will never excite you, and that's cool too. I think it's important to like just do you, right? Like if you're excited about photographing the same scenes that everyone's already photographed, go for it, If it brings you joy, go ahead and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately what it's all about. It's go and shoot what you want, what makes you happy. Obviously with social media nowadays, we're often shooting what other people like or want, whether we're conscious of it or not. But, I don't think, I'm not very good on social media. I have to say I'm not very, because I don't really enjoy editing. I love going out shooting. I love being outside, but I don't really like the editing part. I like actually looking through my photos after and say, oh yeah, that was a really great moment. But I don't enjoy the editing. And I think also it's kind of like a catch-22. I'm not that experienced at it. I feel like I'm not good enough at editing, so I don't enjoy it, and I don't get good enough because I don't, so it's a bit of a vicious circle, but
right. It is. If it's okay with you, I wanted to go back and ask you one question about the subject we were talking about before with the women in landscape photography, because I think one of the things that I'm starting to notice, and then it seems like it's kind of being fleshed out in the survey that you've developed, is that one of the root causes of this particular divide between men and women in landscape photography is that women are finding it more difficult to find other people to go photograph with, and don't necessarily have their own community necessarily to lean into. And so I know that one of the things you and Victoria are working on, like you said, is working on a women-centric photography community. So how can we grow those, and why do you think that those have become important?
Well, I mean, there's actually, it's interesting because there's quite a few, as I was saying, there are already quite a few communities, and so with some of them, like there's one here in the UK called She Clicks, and they're not just landscape and outdoor photography, they're all genres of photography. And I can't remember how many women there are in them, because I'm one of the members. It's free to join. There's something like, 13,000 or something like that. Maybe it's 20,000. Anyhow, it's a huge group of women. And there are local groups, and so they do meetups sometimes, and they'll go out and they'll shoot something. There's not that many. The woman who started is based down in England, so there's more stuff happening down there. There's not as much up here, and when there has been stuff up here, it's not been my genre. It's been mainly portraiture, stuff like that. If there were women who were going out and shooting waterfalls or macro, going to the botanical gardens to shoot macro, or doing intimate scenes, and you're meeting next Sunday, yeah, I'll come. Sure, great. So I think it's kind of getting local groups going. And I know in Canada, there's a few different cities that have different meetup groups. So Edmonton has one. There's a really strong landscape outdoor photography community in Edmonton. I'm not sure about Calgary. I think there's one in Vancouver, and there's one also in Toronto. And so it's guys and girls. So you go to those, and you get to know some people, and then, hey, I'm going out shooting next Sunday. Do you want to come? And so people get to know each other that way. So that helps. With our account so far, in the posts we've had, we've seen a few comments from people saying, oh, this is really great. I'm getting introduced to a whole different set of women photographers than I even knew before. And sometimes it's out of province or slightly different genres or something. So it's good for that. But we're thinking that, it's great to have an account where you're featuring women and you're helping to get them recognized and giving them support and encouragement. There needs to be something more than that. Because the second factor that we found was the second barrier overall in the survey was safety, was human confrontation. And so again, we haven't had a chance to look specifically into men versus women and kind of go through the women and see what were all the leading barriers for women, and then what were all the leading ones for men. We just see the overall picture at the moment. So, I mean, that's another reason why if someone isn't going out, because maybe they're worried about going to the mountains or to the lakes or whatever by themselves, or if they're an astrophotographer, they might, or she might think, I don't want to go out by myself at night, or even if it's wildlife confrontation. So maybe they're not going because they don't have someone to go with. So if we can find, and it's not just our communities, all the women's communities, or just all of the communities, if there are ways of people hooking up together and finding someone to go out shooting with. And one of the things I've heard from some women, and I've heard from some guys as well, in terms of having people to go out with, is some people's partners don't like that they're going out shooting with someone of the opposite sex. Even if that other person is in a relationship or married or whatever. So it's happened to Vic before that she was going to go out shooting with a guy, and the guy's wife wasn't happy that he was going out with Vic. Vic's married. The guy's married. Like, she's totally not interested in him. She just wanted to go out shooting. And I've had the same thing before, where I've had someone then say that we were supposed to go shooting together, and it's like, oh, actually, you know what, my wife won't like that. So that's a shame, because, you know, so I think it's a shame for that person. So then that leads to either the women are waiting for other women to go with, or the guys are just going out shooting with other guys. If we're setting up a group, for example, saying, hey, you know, we're going to facilitate people getting together and meeting up to go shooting, if it's something where it is men and women getting together to go shooting, you have to be really careful with that, because what if it's some random dude that you don't know, or you don't like, we don't want to have to be starting to vet people or doing police background checks for people to make sure that it isn't a psycho killer. And so and also in a country like Canada, it's easier in some place here, like in the UK, where distances are smaller and there's so many towns and villages along the way, and quite a dense population for a small area. In Canada, it's in the States as well, but Canada specifically, we have a massive country with a small population, and people can be really quite spread out. So it's, how do you get the people connected, and get the women connected in particular, to be able to go out and shoot together? So that's something we're looking into. How can we help to facilitate that and help to create connections so that people can find other people to go out and shoot with and not be deterred? And the other thing too is, one of the other factors with that is, if someone's partner isn't into photography, that they might not be able to go out as much to shoot, because, well, obviously they're going to want to spend time with their partner. We had a section that talked about, are the ways that you can think of, or suggestions for how to increase participation and representation of women in landscape, outdoor, and wildlife, or nature photography. And there was one woman who replied that she wants to go out shooting with a friend of hers, but this friend of hers, the husband, isn't supportive of her going out shooting and won't help with the childcare or help with the house stuff if the wife goes out shooting. So as a result, the woman can't really go out shooting. So this woman who wants her friend to go with her can't go with her. So maybe that then affects not just the woman whose husband isn't supportive, but it also affects the woman who wants to go with her friend, who then can't go because she doesn't have someone to go with. So it's really quite like all these different layers of issues to address and to try to help people get to, and also for some of them, it's not just a matter of having someone to go with. It's maybe they don't have the gear. Maybe, we haven't really looked so much into detail yet at the financial constraints, because obviously camera gear is expensive. And for some people, and for women, historically, a lot of the time women are earning less than men. So maybe they don't have the same disposable income to be able to get the gear to go out and shoot in the same way or the same amount of time as some of the guys would be able to.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is that we need less men who are jerks. Because, I could never imagine telling my wife, no, I'm sorry, you can't go do that because I need you to stay home and do the dishes. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not to say it's like that, but I mean, for some women, and even some of the women that we've heard from who are full-time professional photographers, they're sometimes not going out as much as they would otherwise because, oh, you know what, now it's the weekend and my husband's around and, oh, it's really great light, but, it's the weekend, we're going to spend time together. And he's not a photographer, he's not into it, so I can't drag him out with me. So it's not necessarily, I mean, for sure there are guys out there who are jerks and who are misogynistic and all that, but it's not necessarily not just that. It's not that. It's also sometimes that the guys aren't aware, or there's a lot of different reasons. It's not just because they're guys who are being idiots. So
and this also goes back to that cultural difference, right? I mean, I'm guessing that on average, again, wide brush here, but some women are going to be less likely to challenge their spouse, like, hey, actually, I need this time for me. It's important for me to be able to do this for myself. Whereas a lot of women are more nurturing and they're going to be more like, oh, well, whatever you want, baby. Like, and I know a lot of couples like that where the women are very, like that's kind of how they were conditioned their entire life. That's what their parents modeled for them, right? Like the wife is kind of the caregiver and takes care of the things at home and blah, 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 blah. And that's what they were taught. And sometimes that's what the men were taught in their relationships with watching their parents interact as well. So I guess I was lucky in that my parents were very egalitarian. Like they split everything and did everything together, and it was never like that. But I've met people since then where I'm like, oh, really? Your upbringing was very different than mine.
Yeah.
And that explains a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, that's the thing, because growing up, my parents, my dad was divorced and had an ex-wife and 3 children to support, as well as me and my mom and dad, or my mom and my brother and I. So my mom worked as well. She worked not always full time when I was young, but certainly, from the time I was at school, both my brother and I were at school, and certainly during my teen years, there were a lot of other kids at school whose moms didn't work. They were stay-at-home moms, and my mom worked full time, and so I was really proud of that. So yay, go mom! She's working full time. Yeah, go. And so if she was off at work, because sometimes she'd be working shifts, so she could be working 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. or something like that, or maybe she'd be working nights sometimes. And so my dad would, so maybe she'd prepare dinner and it'd be, okay, come home from school and could you please put it in the oven at such and such a time? Great. And then my dad would kind of finish stuff up when he arrived. And then later on, so he was a few years older than my mom, and he retired before my mom, and my dad actually became the cook. He was the house cook. So he did, all of the cooking, and he did a lot of the other stuff while my mom was still working. Yeah. So to me, it just is like, I couldn't imagine having a partner who says, well, no, I don't want you to go out and do that because there's housework to do or kids to look after or whatever stuff. So yeah,
but it's a thing.
Yeah, it is a thing. Obviously it's a thing. And that's, that's from a Western perspective. I mean, imagine how it is in some of the countries, like, some South American countries or Asian countries or African countries where it's even more of a sort of a macho society and the women have even less possibilities. Because that's the thing, like in our survey we had, I don't think anybody from Africa replied to it. Maybe a handful of people from South America. I think we had somebody from Costa Rica and maybe Mexico or Peru. We didn't have much in the way of Asian people either. So it was very kind of, and maybe, partly because of us and our audiences and who our followers are and where we're based. So it was a lot of North Americans, a lot of Europeans, some Australians and Kiwis, but I would say probably predominantly white, upper middle class kind of respondents,
Western
I would say.
Perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally. All right. Last couple of questions. Tell us about the workshops that you have coming up, keeping in mind that this podcast will come out October 7th.
Yep. So I'll be doing some autumn waterfall workshops here as well. So again, it'll be women only on the Saturday and anybody on the Sunday. And then I'll be doing some stuff over the winter, going back to Canada again for the winter to Vancouver, sort of early December. So I'll be doing some West Coast workshops, waterfall workshops, because it's rainy and wet, obviously, on the coast. And then the big one is I'm doing next summer with a colleague who's based in South Africa and works, she's a women's travel company and very focused on conservation. And so we were partnering together and we're doing a women's waterfalls and wildlife trip to Zambia, sort of late June into early July. So that will be the big one. So we're just in the process of finalizing details for that. So it'll be about 70% waterfalls and about 30% wildlife. And yeah, so that's I'm really looking forward to that. And I haven't been to Zambia before, so and she has. So she's the one that's kind of getting all that organized. And so I'm looking forward to that. And there'll be some other things that come up along the way, but those are the ones that I have scheduled already.
Brilliant. And then last question, who do you recommend for the podcast? Who are some individuals that you find inspiring or that we need to learn more about?
Yeah, so I've got a few, and I'm sure it probably doesn't come any surprise to anybody that they're going to all be women. And there's a mix of different countries that they come from. I actually started making a list yesterday, and I think I've got actually about 55 women at the moment. So I'm going to send those to you afterwards. But of the ones who I think, I wanted to kind of go into a different genre for each of the women. So the first one is kind of grand landscapes. In particular, her name's Ashley Voykin. Her on Instagram, she's Ash Voykin. So she's based in British Columbia. She's Canadian. She's in the Kootenays in a town called Rossland in southeast BC. So she does a lot of mountain stuff and outdoor adventure. But I think what's really interesting is in the past few years, she started documenting the wildfires in the area, and each year seems to be getting worse. And so she's got a feature coming out. I think it's next month in Mother magazine. So talking about the fires and some of her images. And so I think it'd be really interesting to talk to her about how she got into shooting the fires and why. And so her images are both stunning, but at the same time terrifying and heartbreaking. So she's the first one. Then a woman that I discovered recently called, she's Italian but lives in Belgium, or she's kind of Italian in Belgium, Chiara Talia. She started photography a few years ago. She also went through burnout and some mental health issues. She was doing her PhD and she decided to leave it. She was out one day and saw a robin and ended up shooting it, and has ended up getting into bird photography as a result. And she now does teaching, and she has a YouTube channel. And she also did a survey similar to ours, and she did it. She talked about it on International Women's Day this past March. And so she had 323 respondents and had similar results to us, to some of what we've seen so far. And she has a YouTube episode where she talks about that. But I think it's interesting for her also how she's gotten into birds just from this one chance encounter, and how she's used that also as a way to combat mental health, and how she's become a teacher. Then there's a woman in England called Courtney Victoria, and she is someone who does a little bit of everything. She mainly has been a landscape photographer. She also has a YouTube channel. So I met her at the photography show in the UK here this past March. I think I went to a presentation she was doing, and then I discovered her and started following her. And she is also someone who has been doing a lot of landscape and water things. So she's done a lot of woodlands and waterfalls. So of course I like the waterfalls. But she's actually recently turned to macro, and kind of moving more and more into macro, and she especially really likes shooting mushrooms and doing the smaller scenes. So she is someone else. Daisy Gilardini, she's Swiss but based in Canada. She is a photographer in residence with the Royal Canadian Geographic Society. She's very conservation focused, and she does a lot of work in the Arctic and Antarctic, so a lot of work with polar bears and some big expeditions and some really incredible wildlife images. So someone who is a drone photographer, a female drone photographer whose work I really like, is Danny Watson. She's based in Australia. I think she's in Sydney.
Oh, yeah.
And she's done a lot of sort of interesting sort of top-down. So I really like the top-down images and the kind of abstract views in Australia. There's actually a lot of the female drone pilots that I know and follow are out of Australia. So there's something about Australia that has drone pilots.
They have some ridiculous landscapes there that are particularly good from the air.
Absolutely, they do, for sure. Yeah. And so she's done just some other regular landscape stuff, but she was, I think it was last year or the year before, she was either first or runner-up in the Australian Landscape Photography Awards. So, and she also, I think she'd be interesting to talk to because she had a lot of backlash from that, from guys.
I remember that.
Yeah. So she,
it was bad, actually.
It was really bad. Yeah. It was really, really bad, which is unfortunate because you want to be, when someone is doing well and winning a photography competition, you want to be congratulating them, boosting them up, not dragging them down. So that's an unfortunate thing. But yeah, she's a great photographer and has some beautiful drone images. So there we go. And I'm going to send you my list of other women because there are so many others that, I could have gone on and on. Yeah, it's interesting because I have a male friend who I pointed out to him. So, when people post other people's images to their stories on Instagram, and I commented him a few times actually and said, hey, dude, you're only posting guys. Like, where are the women photographers? And he said, I don't see any work from women that I think is very good. I don't really know any women photographers who are good. I was like, what, are you kidding me? Yeah. And so I kind of I don't want to say I've trained him, but there's kind of trained him. I guess, I want to kind of encourage him enough times. But actually, he was really great because this past International Women's Day, he posted a ton of women on his stories, and so I think sometimes it's just recognizing that. So I don't think that most guys out there are purposely, not
Right.
recognizing women. I think you see the people that you're with, and if you're going out shooting with guys, and those are the
Right.
ones that you're gonna recommend and support and encourage. And so I think that's the thing too, is the more women we see out there and the more we're encouraging and supporting and recommending them, then the more women also who are coming up will see more women who are doing it, and then it'll just kind of build on that.
Right.
So I heard this story from someone, a woman photographer a few months ago, that she was leading a workshop, and there was another group staying at the same hotel leading a workshop, and there was one woman who was there by herself, and she wasn't going out with the rest of the group. And so it was partly that she, I guess, was really intimidated. She felt really excluded. There was kind of just a lot of kind of male banter, and she just didn't feel comfortable. And so it would be to encourage the guys who are running workshops to especially if you've got only one woman attending, or even a few women, but just to be aware that sometimes women approach it differently. Sometimes especially if it's a woman with a group of just guys, that she might not feel comfortable to say, hey, I don't really know what I'm doing, or how do I set this up, or how do I get my settings right? So it's just, because to increase the representation of women, or the participation of women, it's not just a women pushing women thing. We also need the guys on board. And so we've had some really great support from some of the guys who responded as well to the survey. But I would love to see more guys posting more women to their stories, and more guys recommending women, or not just the guys, actually people in general coming on the show, or any show, recommending more women, because there really are some absolutely fantastic and amazing and inspiring women photographers out there. And it'd be great to get to see more of their work.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like I have the opposite bias. Like most of the photography I like is from women these days.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe I'm just weird.
Yeah, but I think that also what you like, it changes as you go along, as you say, with your own career and your own craft, it progresses. And I think what we like and interact with also changes that way too.
For sure. Well, Fiona, this has been really fun. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me on the show, and wish you the best of luck with your upcoming workshops.
Thanks very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's been great to get to have a chance to have a chat in person. Looking forward to, I love listening to your episodes, so I'm looking forward to hearing more of them, and to hopefully hearing some more women
Awesome.
coming on soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Thank you to Fiona for the awesome conversation this week on the show. I look forward to hearing more about your survey results, and I appreciate you trying to make a difference in our community. One of the things that I love most about creating this podcast is the fact that I get to showcase the photography and amazing initiatives that other creative folks are doing, including highlighting the amazing work of some lesser known photographers. If I was motivated purely by money, you'd only see me interviewing guests that offered me the best chance to increase my viewing numbers, thereby improving my odds of gaining corporate sponsorships. I personally think that in any creative pursuit, the creation itself should come first, and the money will follow if people are drawn to what you are creating. That's why I have opted to use Patreon. Listeners can determine what this podcast is worth to them by supporting me there, free from commercials and corporate influence. Of course, this model only works if a broad base of listeners opt in, and currently only about 1% of listeners have taken the time to step up to support the show, regardless of me reminding people week after week, which I'm sure is really tiresome for you. If you'd like to see me continue with weekly episodes, now is your chance to vote with your wallet by going to patreon.com/fstopandlisten, or by visiting the link in the show notes. Thank you to everyone who has already stepped up to support the show. I really, really do appreciate it. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Cheers. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.